Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're doing something, well, kinda different. We're gonna take Plato's ancient, classic masterpiece, The Republic, and we're totally transforming it into an urgent, modern operations manual. To really understand our society and, honestly, ourselves. We usually think of ancient philosophy as this dusty, disconnected thing, but as we'll see, these blueprints drawn up over 2,000 years ago, they are absolutely crucial and startlingly relevant to the very systems we're trapped in today.
But before we can even think about building the perfect society, we gotta start backward. We really have to ask a terrifying question, one that challenges the whole nature of the digital illusions and data arrays we consume every single day. What if your entire reality is literally just shadows on a wall? Keep that on the back of your mind as we unpack this, okay? Because Plato's answer to this is gonna completely reframe how you look at your smartphone forever. No joke.
Okay, let's dive right into Section 1, The Crisis of Athens, a postmortem. To really wrap our heads around Plato's radical blueprint, we first have to diagnose the catastrophic structural collapse of his home city. I mean, you can't understand the cure without diagnosing the disease, right? So this Athenian collapse kicks off in the late 5th century BC, right after a totally crushing military defeat in the Peloponnesian War. And this wasn't just a simple loss, it was like a massive, profound political hangover. Moving forward, Athens just spirals into a decaying democracy. The healthy debate that used to define the city-state, completely corrupted by populist leaders who relied entirely on unanchored rhetoric, just empty talk. And all this instability culminated in 399 BC with the deeply traumatic state execution of Plato's own mentor, Socrates. Finally, all of this absolute chaos leads directly to the genesis of the Academy, which was the Western world's first institution of higher learning, built as a direct, urgent response to this massive systemic failure. I actually want to pause on that third point for a second, because it's the central structural event that shaped Plato's entire methodology. Socrates was legally sacrificed by a corrupted Athenian democracy on these completely unsubstantiated charges of corrupting the youth. They forced him to drink hemlock. And the craziest part? This wasn't some unruly mob, it was the democratic system working exactly as it was designed to, yet it produced this horrific injustice. So, this systemic trauma forced Plato to deeply question whether the average citizen could actually govern without objective data. It drove him to found the Academy to train a totally new kind of executive, one guided purely by reason, empirical truth, and the absolute good, far, far away from the rhetorical illusions of the public square.
Moving right along to Section 2, Designing the Ideal City, the Kallipolis Stress Test.
To figure out what a perfectly just individual actually looks like, Socrates and his partners don't just sit around looking inward. Nope, they launch a massive conceptual stress test, designing a perfectly calibrated city-state completely from scratch. But remember, this explainer isn't just walking through some dry operations manual. The Republic is a dynamic, dialectical debate. On one side, we have the sophist Thrasymachus, who represents this raw, cynical realpolitik. He basically argues that justice is nothing other than the interest of the stronger, meaning whoever holds the power simply writes the corporate laws and conveniently stamps them as just. On the other side, we have Socrates, who spends the rest of the dialogue totally dismantling that view. He argues for a cosmic alignment, proving that true justice isn't about power at all. It's an internal alignment that's absolutely vital for the core health of the human soul. So to map the macro city directly onto the micro-human soul, the whole thing is divided into a three-tiered class system. For the state to operate in optimal harmony, it absolutely needs these distinct groups. First up, the producers. Their psychological driver is appetite, and their function is managing baseline supply and labor. Next, we have the guardians. Driven by courage, they manage external security and defense. And finally, the rulers, or magistrates. Driven by reason, their function is executing all strategic decisions. Notice how these societal functions perfectly mirror the three parts of the human psyche? It's like a giant puzzle fitting together. If appetite overrules reason in a person, they fail. If producers overrule rulers in a state, the state completely fails. Which brings us to Section 3, Executive Leadership, the Philosopher King. This structural harmony we just talked about leads us directly to Plato's most disruptive thesis regarding executive leadership. He claims global systemic failures will only cease when this rational class assumes sovereign executive power. But getting onto this executive track, it required radical compliance training. We are talking rigorous intellectual and physical training until the age of 50. Actually, it goes even further than that. complete divestment from all private property, and the total elimination of individual family structures. Why go to such extremes? To guarantee absolutely zero conflicts of interest and to completely wipe out any possibility of institutional asset corruption. I mean, they don't rule for personal gain because they literally have nothing to personally gain. All right, Section 4, the core mechanism, the allegory of the cave. Let's see exactly why these rigorously trained leaders are so incredibly vital to the survival of the city, through what is arguably the most famous operational metaphor in Western thought. Plato wants us to visualize this. Imagine prisoners who have been chained since infancy inside a dark, subterranean cave. They're facing away from the entrance, totally stuck. Behind them is an open fire that projects the silhouettes of statues onto the wall right in front of them. For these prisoners, these distorted, low-resolution shadows represent the absolute entirety of real data. They have zero concept of a 3D object, let alone the real world outside. To them, those shadows are their undeniable reality. But what happens if someone actually escapes? Breaking a prisoner free isn't some joyful, easy aha moment. It's a brutal process. Step 1, they are unchained and physically forced toward the light. Step 2 is absolutely crucial: severe physical friction and blinding optical pain. Initially, they just want to retreat back to the comfortable security of the shadows. But if they push through that pain, we reach step 3. Their eyes finally adapt, and they see the actual architecture of reality. And then, step 4, they step outside and contemplate the sun itself, which Plato uses to represent the ultimate form of the good. Insight, Plato is telling us, requires immense painful friction. Now we hit a really tragic feedback loop. Let's say this liberated individual returns to the cave out of corporate empathy, right, to free his former peers. Well, his eyes are no longer accustomed to the darkness, so he stumbles around. He appears completely ridiculous to the rest of the group. When he tries to tell them that their shadow metrics are just an illusion and that a fully optimized reality exists outside, he is mocked. And the chilling conclusion, if he attempts to actually unchain them, the prisoners would execute him. This is a direct, haunting narrative reference to the exact fate Athens dealt to Socrates. It turns out, people will fiercely defend their familiar illusions. So let's bring it right back to today, Section 5, our modern digital cave. This is exactly why this ancient text serves as a literal operations manual for today. Because, guys, this isn't just ancient history. It's a terrifyingly accurate mirror reflecting our very own reality. We really have to pause right here and ask ourselves, are we still staring at the wall in the 21st century? Is Plato's allegory actually the perfect, most accurate description of our modern, hyper-connected landscape? Think about it. Today, our smartphone displays and screens, they are the modern shadow wall. They keep our attention completely imprisoned. And the fire projecting those shadows, those are our algorithmically curated feeds and digital misinformation echo chambers. We aren't consuming actual reality. We are consuming highly filtered, distorted, and totally unverified data arrays that have been engineered specifically to keep us staring at the wall. We are the prisoners and the algorithms are the fire. So what does this all mean for us? What's our task? Well, the pursuit of raw truth and the friction required to break out of our cognitive comfort zones remains the absolute ultimate operational challenge of the human condition. Just like that prisoner, stepping away from the curated feed into the glaring light of actual empirical reality is going to cause intellectual and social friction. It is going to be painful, for sure, but it is literally the only way to avoid the fate of the decaying Athenian democracy. I'll leave you with this final provocative thought from our explainer today. Are your daily algorithms just shadow metrics? And do you actually have the courage to endure the friction of waking up? Plato gave us the blueprint over 2,000 years ago. He warned us about the shadows. The only question now is whether you will choose to unchain yourself and walk toward the light, or if you'll simply keep staring at the wall.